in rural. Nagano, a farmer walks past his neighbor's freshly tilled plot without a second glance. His own beds haven't been turned in decades, buried under rice straw and decomposing organic matter. The soil beneath is darker, spongier, alive with earthworms. Western visitors expect neglect. Instead, they find some of the most productive ground they've ever seen. A single pass of a rototiller severs 70% of the fungal networks that took months to build. These Japanese farmers have known that for generations. So, what do they understand about living soil that the rest of the world has overlooked? Kenji, a lifelong farmer from Nagano, stands at the edge of his own field, boots sinking gently into a surface blanketed by last autumn's rice straw. He glances to his right, where his neighbor's plot lies exposed, tilled bare and pale, the soil crumbly but oddly lifeless. Kenji's hands part the straw, revealing a dark, almost black layer beneath. He lifts a handful and lets it fall, spongy and cool, alive with the shimmer of earthworms twisting through the decomposing mat. The straw here isn't just a thin cover. It runs 4, sometimes even 6 inches deep, enough to muffle the sound of footsteps, thick enough that moisture lingers days after a rain. A visiting researcher from California, boots still clean from the airport, kneels beside Kenji. She expects to find tangled roots and stubborn clay. Instead, her fingers slide easily into the soil, meeting almost no resistance. She pulls back in surprise, earthworms wriggling in her palm, the soil clinging to their bodies like cake batter. "It's like forest ground," she mutters, unable to hide her disbelief. Kenji smiles, saying simply, "The soil is not mine. It belongs to the children who come after." A rototilled plot, just meters away, tells a different story. The surface is broken into neat rows, but the color is lighter, the texture drier, and not a worm in sight. The faint smell of diesel lingers in the morning air. Here, the ground is easy to turn but quick to harden. Kenji's field, by contrast, seems to breathe. Every handful reveals a living network of roots, straw, and glistening fungal threads. The difference is not subtle. On one side, a quiet riot of life. On the other, a mechanical order that feels strangely empty. Western visitors, trained to equate bare, turned soil with health, find themselves unsettled. How can the untouched field, covered in what looks like farm waste, be richer, darker, and more productive than the one that's been freshly prepared? The paradox is impossible to ignore. Kenji's answer is neither technical nor mystical. He gestures to the thick mulch and the teeming life beneath it, and repeats a phrase passed down in his family. "We do not break what we have borrowed." The question lingers in the cool morning air. What do these farmers see in the soil that the rest of the world has missed? Across rural Japan, fields are more than places of labor. They are shaped by a philosophy that stretches back centuries. The Satoyama landscape, a patchwork of paddies, woods, and streams, embodies a way of living where the boundary between nature and cultivation is deliberately blurred. Here, land is not owned outright, but entrusted from one generation to the next, each family bound by the expectation to return it as healthy as it was received. Edo period maps from Nagano and Niigata still show terraced fields, their boundaries marked in red to signal where deep plowing must stop. The Kobayashi family, whose records trace 8 generations, has tended the same parcels, repeating a simple vow. The soil must be handed down, not depleted. In Kyoto, temple fields honor contracts from the Heian era, forbidding any act that would sever the earth's bond with the kami, the spirits believed to dwell in land and harvest. Central to this ethic is mottainai, a principle that goes beyond avoiding waste. Mottainai is a daily practice. Rice straw, fallen leaves, and kitchen scraps are never thrown away, but returned to the soil as mulch or compost. Every decision on the farm is measured by a single question: does this action sustain the soil's vitality, or does it take more than can be given back? Deep tillage is quietly resisted, not just for its impact on structure, but because it is seen as impatience, a disregard for the slow cycles that tie people to place. This code is alive in village assemblies, rituals, and family traditions. The Tanaka clan in Kyushu spreads hardwood litter from Satoyama woods each winter, believing it keeps the land breathing. In Hokkaido, Ainu-influenced farms still use wooden forks, leaving deeper layers untouched. Across regions, the core remains. Soil is a shared inheritance, and each generation is measured by its care. The sight of mulch-covered fields signals a promise, restraint, respect, and a future written in living earth. Dr. Keiko Sato's laboratory in Nagano Prefecture has become a window into the living world beneath undisturbed Japanese fields. Her team's measurements reveal a startling density of life. In just 1 gram of soil from a mulched, untilled plot, they find an average of 210 kilometers of fungal hyphae, thread-like filaments that weave the soil together. That's more than 5 meters of mycelium in every teaspoon. When a rototiller cuts through, nearly 70% of this network is destroyed in a single pass. The living scaffolding that holds moisture, moves nutrients, and links plant roots vanishes, damage that can take years to heal. Bacterial counts echo this loss. DNA analysis shows undisturbed soil contains 1.8 billion bacterial gene copies per gram, compared to just 1.1 billion in tilled plots. These bacterial microbes drive nitrogen cycling, decompose straw, and support plant health. Tilling not only reduces their numbers, but favors species adapted to disturbance, undermining the slow building fertility that sustains crops over time. Earthworm surveys add another layer. In paired field trials, Sato recorded a drop from 68 grams per square meter to 39 grams after a single rototiller pass, a 42% loss in just 48 hours. The remaining worms burrow deeper, leaving the upper soil exposed and less resilient. The earthworm biomass decline highlights the fragility of the soil ecosystem. Seed bank experiments show rototilling brings dormant weed seeds to the surface, triggering a 3-fold surge in weed germination. In contrast, undisturbed, mulched beds suppress weeds naturally, as straw blocks light and creates a hostile microclimate. Each metric, hyphal length, bacterial abundance, earthworm biomass, weed emergence, points to the same conclusion. The living soil network flourishes when left intact and unravels under mechanical disturbance. Masanobu Fukuoka's farm on the island of Shikoku became a living archive of what happens when soil is left undisturbed for decades. Starting in 1945, Fukuoka refused the plow. Instead, he spread deep layers of rice straw, sowed clover and daikon as cover crops, and let nature take over the work of cultivation. Each year, he wrote down the numbers by hand. Rice yields hovering around 5.2 tons per hectare. matching or even exceeding the national average for chemical-intensive farms. Over 50 harvests, the soil darkened, earthworm counts climbed, and the need for labor and fuel dropped sharply. Fukuoka's ledgers, later translated by outside researchers, show a consistent pattern. No synthetic fertilizer, no pesticides, no mechanical disturbance, and yet the fields remained reliably productive. In 1965, the Ministry of Agriculture sent inspectors to test his claims. Soil samples from his 0.2 hectare parcel revealed a steady rise in organic carbon, from 2.3% to 2.9% over 20 years, and a drop in bulk density, meaning the ground grew looser and more fertile over time. Extractable nitrogen increased as well, suggesting that the living mulch and cover crops were cycling nutrients more efficiently than conventional plots. Independent observers, including Larry Korn, confirmed these findings, noting that soil respiration rates, an indicator of microbial activity, were 20% higher than on neighboring tilled land. Fukuoka's approach did not rely on faith alone. His records provided hard, quantitative proof that a field could yield abundant rice and barley for half a century without ever breaking the soil's biological web. Even when the ministry demanded a tillage schedule in the 1970s, Fukuoka simply presented his yield tables and soil data. The results were undeniable. His fields outperformed local chemical farms by 12% in grain yield, all while using zero synthetic inputs. The evidence from Shikoku stands as a challenge to the assumption that tillage is necessary for productivity. Instead, the record shows that patient stewardship, leaving the soil's structure intact, can sustain both crops and land across generations. Kenji presses his palm into a thick layer of straw, 4 to 6 inches deep, spread across the rice bed each autumn. This isn't just tradition, it's protection. The straw locks in moisture, shields against harsh sun, and insulates from late frosts. Even after dry spells, the soil underneath stays cool and damp, creating a haven for roots and earthworms. In Kyushu and Niigata, mulched fields retain 85% of their field capacity. Moisture through the season, while bare tilled plots hold only 60%. Temperature swings are gentler here, dropping by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, which means less stress for seedlings and slower weed growth. Weeds rarely get a foothold. The straw blocks sunlight and, as it breaks down, releases chemicals that discourage most weed seeds. In test plots, weed density in mulched, untilled beds averages less than half a plant per square meter, just a quarter of what's found in tilled soil. Kenji's hoe stays mostly idle. Spring brings out the hori-hori, a slender blade that slips into the top 2 inches of soil, loosening without flipping. For heavier ground, Kenji and his son use a broad fork, stepping it into open air channels. In Niigata's clay, a single pass drops penetration resistance from 2.8 to 1.9 megapascals, matching a rototiller's effect but leaving mycelial threads untouched. 2 people can finish half a hectare in 90 minutes with no diesel, no fumes. The soil stays spongy, the fungal network alive, and the bed ready for the next layer. Deep mulch and gentle loosening. These are the first 2 pillars of the Japanese toolkit. Aki Tanaka stands at the margin of her Kyushu field, hands dusted with compost, eyes scanning the green sweep of winter rye and clover. Where Kenji's family leans on straw and gentle loosening, Aki's approach draws from the Satoyama woods and the changing rhythms of subtropical rain. Each autumn, she layers 10 tons of compost per hectare, including kitchen scraps, rice hulls, and leaf litter across the beds. The compost is never buried. Instead, rain pulls nutrients down through the mulch, feeding the soil from above. Earthworms drag particles deeper, creating a living conveyor that moves fertility downward layer by layer. Laboratory tests from Kyoto's temple fields show that this surface feeding raises soil organic carbon by 0.4% per year, 4 times faster than in neighboring tilled plots. Aki's off-season beds are never bare. In Kyushu, she sows winter rye and clover as soon as the summer harvest ends. The rye's dense roots hold the soil through torrential rains, slashing erosion by nearly 80% compared to uncovered ground. Clover fixes nitrogen in nodules along its roots, quietly supplying the next rice crop with what it needs. In Nagano and Niigata, farmers choose buckwheat and daikon. Buckwheat scavenges leftover phosphorus, while daikon's thick taproot drills through compacted layers, leaving behind air-filled channels when it dies back in spring. Hokkaido's short summers call for vetch and ryegrass, which shoot up fast and protect the soil from wind and frost. These living covers do more than shield the ground. They keep the field's biology in motion. As cover crops decompose, their roots feed bacteria and fungi, while the mulch above slows nutrient loss to rain. Satoyama records show nitrate leaching drops by up to 45% when covers are used, and bulk density falls, making the earth easier to work each year. The field becomes a continuous cycle. Compost and covers above, roots and worms below, all feeding the next harvest. For Aki, the aim isn't just to avoid waste, it's to build a soil that grows richer with each passing season. A patch of untouched grass marks the edge of Kenji's property, slated to become a new vegetable bed. Instead of reaching for a rototiller, Kenji begins by cutting the grass as close to the ground as possible, leaving the roots and stubble in place. He lays down overlapping sheets of rice paper, thick enough to block light but thin enough to break down with the first rains. On top of this, he spreads a 5-centimeter layer of half-finished compost, kitchen scraps and leaf litter still fragrant with the scent of last autumn's forest. The final layer is 6 centimeters of rice straw, fluffed by hand and pulled from last year's harvest. The stack forms a dense, 3-part blanket that seals in moisture and denies sunlight to the weeds below. Kenji explains that nothing is dug, nothing is turned. The weight of the layers presses the old grass flat, while earthworms and beetles begin their silent work beneath. Rain soaks through the straw, carrying nutrients from the compost into the soil, and by the 3rd month, the rice paper softens, its edges curling as fungi and bacteria digest the cellulose. Earthworm castings appear on the surface, a sign that the underground world has accepted the offering. For 3 to 4 months, the bed is left undisturbed. By the time the first planting season arrives, the old sod has faded into a dark, crumbly layer. Kenji lifts a corner of straw to reveal a tangle of roots and decomposed paper, now indistinguishable from the native earth. The new bed is ready, no tillage, no diesel, no disruption. The only tools needed are patience and a willingness to let time do what machines cannot. This is the final piece in the Japanese system, a way to open new ground by building, not breaking, the living soil. Dr. Keiko Sato stands over 2 adjacent rice beds in Nagano, notebook in hand. Her field trials measure the numbers that so often get lost in philosophy. In the no-till, mulch-covered plot, rice yields average 5.4 tons per hectare, 4 to 16% higher than the tilled field next door. The difference is not just in the grain. The tilled plot burns through 120 liters of diesel per hectare each season, while the untilled bed uses none. That is a direct cut of 350 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions every year, the equivalent of taking a small car off the road for a month. Labor tells its own story. Mulching and gentle loosening demand more hands at first, about 150 hours per hectare, compared to 85 for a rototiller. But the work shifts from noisy, hurry passes to quiet, steady cycles. Fuel costs vanish. Water savings are measurable. Mulched fields retain up to 85% of their moisture, while tilled beds hold only 60% through the growing season. Weed pressure drops sharply, with less than half a plant per square meter in the undisturbed plots, compared to as many as 2 in tilled ground. Sato's data, compiled over 5 years, show soil organic carbon rising 3 times faster in no-till beds. Bulk density drops, making the ground easier to work each year. The net result is not just a richer field, but a system that gives more than it takes: higher yields, lower emissions, steadier moisture, and a labor rhythm that fits the seasons instead of fighting them. Kenji's diary opens with a single line. First year, the straw lies thick, but the soil is still learning. That first season, weeds push through the mulch, and the rice roots are thin, hesitant. He records hours spent hand-pulling, noting, patience is the only tool that works. By the second year, the straw layer grows denser, and earthworm castings begin to cluster at the surface. Kenji's notes shift. He writes of fewer weeds and stronger, deeper roots. The third spring, he finds the soil holds water even after weeks without rain, and the rice stands taller, greener, more resilient. His labor drops, the need for intervention fades, and the field starts to echo the quiet rhythm of the forest edge. An elder from Nagano, whose family has farmed the same terraces for nearly a century, puts it simply: a wise farmer thinks in hundreds of years, not in harvests. He gestures to a stone boundary built by his grandfather and points to the dark earth that has never been plowed. We are only caretakers. The proof is here. This field has fed my family for 4 generations without ever being broken. Kenji's final entry after 4 years reads, "Now the soil works for me." The transition is not measured in yields alone, but in the slow, steady return of life. The lesson is not about quick results, but about entering into a relationship with the land, one that rewards patience, humility, and the willingness to let time, not machines, do the deepest work. Today, as global soils degrade at unprecedented rates, Japanese farmers show that true fertility is not manufactured, but inherited, protected, and quietly renewed. Science now confirms what tradition always suspected. Soil thrives when we disturb less and observe more. The real innovation is patient, not machinery. Every untouched layer is a promise kept with the future. What will we leave beneath our own feet? Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below.